very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mungu Shampagi. Moving and talking about elections from a landslide, which actually, if you round off, is 99%. 99% of Rwandans in Rwanda and in part of the diaspora, many parts of the of outside Rwanda were able to vote and turned out a result for President Paul Kagame of 6,650,722 votes, which is equivalent to 98.63%. If you're a mathematician and round off, that means he scored 99%. His two opponents, Frank Habineza, got 31,633, which is 0.47%, and Philippe Mpayimana got 49,177, equivalent to 0.73%, meaning that the two candidates in the opposition shared a percentage of that election. But we also have an election which one side is a landslide, on the other hand, it's razor thin. Nobody can tell with certainty today what the results in the Kenyan election on Tuesday will look like. It's highly likely that the two major candidates, Raila Odinga, he's a perennial opposition candidate and contestant, and Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the incumbent, might be forced into a runoff. Though, like the Ugandan constitution, the Kenyan constitution also provides for a 50+1% of the vote. What does that mean? Is this a reflection of advancement of democracy on the African continent and particularly in the East African community? To discuss that tonight, like we promised last Sunday, let me start with Onapito Ekomolite, Corporate Affairs Director, Corporate and Legal Affairs Director at Nile Breweries, Eddie InBev. I make that mistake all the time. Very nice to have you.
Good evening, Charles, and good evening, panel.
But talking about elections, Onapito has won an election, he's lost an election, and he has been behind the strategy for an election for
others.
For President Yoweri Museveni. We have Melina Fleitas Izama. Melina, you spent some time in Kigali. You're watching this election, and I was reading you wrote an article for the Washington Post.
I did.
Yes. Why is it? Here's why Kagame won a third term.
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Very nice to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And Melina has been here before, a few times before, but the spaces are too far apart.
A long hiatus.
Yes.
But I had a replacement for that time, so I think you know who.
Yes. I think the viewers know who. And of course we have Dismas Nkunda. Dismas, always a pleasure to be with you here.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Dismas Nkunda is an expert on regional affairs, but particularly he follows refugee issues. And he's been a journalist for many years, and now he's been following developments in the region fairly closely. So it'll give us a good perspective of what is going on. Let's start with the Rwandan election. I want to start with you, Melina. You, in your article, you say, here is why Paul Kagame won the third term. So can you tell our viewers, why did Kagame...
Sure. So first of all, I have to say this is a very difficult, it was very difficult to write that article. It's very difficult to analyze Rwandan politics. You find the debate is extremely polarized. On the one hand, you have people who adore Kagame, including in the international community, who think that he's just done incredible things for Rwanda and would be very happy to see him stay indefinitely. On the other hand, you have people who basically don't believe anything good coming out of Rwanda, or if there is something good, think it's at too high a cost, that people are being coerced to behave in certain ways, they're being killed in Rwanda or abroad, these kinds of things. So you find an extremely polarized debate. It's extremely difficult to walk a middle line and try and have an objective analysis based on what we actually know and recognize what we don't know. So on the basis of that, this is where I tried to make an analysis of how can we understand Paul Kagame's win, which is overwhelming in vote share and also overwhelming in turnout. It's unbelievable. It's incredible. It sounds like a farce, basically. How could this possibly happen? How could this be real? So I think there's a few things to keep in mind. So one of them is something that all of our viewers here would be familiar with, which has to do with Rwanda's history. And you could spend a long time, an entire show, talking about that history. But if we just start from '94, which is not where the history begins, but let's start there, you have seen Rwanda come from a place of complete destruction. So you have to rebuild the economy, you have to recreate a monopoly of violence over the state. For the government, you have to rebuild everything from scratch. Somehow, Rwandans under Paul Kagame have managed to do that. So in a way, Kagame is a known quantity. Rwandans know what they're likely to see in the future if they vote him again. There's a lot of uncertainty about what comes next, which I'm sure we can spend more time discussing, but that's one. So he's a known quantity. The second is that voting is not just expressing your private opinion about who to support. In this particular context, and others as well, it's a sort of public ritual in the sense that you're creating common knowledge about the legitimacy of the state. So it's a very social act. When you go to vote, other people see you whether you're there or not. So especially with small communities, people would very easily notice if you had gone to the polling station or if you hadn't. So there can be some social pressure to turn up to vote, even in the absence. So there's a lot of discussion about people being bussed into places, being forced to go to polling stations, coerced, and so on, which I can't speak to because I don't have any evidence on that, to be honest. But even in the absence of that, you can have massive turnout if there's an expectation that what is expected of people is to turn out to vote, in a sense to reaffirm the political settlement that has been arrived at. And so it becomes uncomfortable on a social level if you don't turn out to vote or if you don't go to a rally. And in that context, you might say, well, I might as well just go and vote, then nobody will talk about me, I don't have to worry about anything, let me just go and do that. So that's another reason. And then another is that some section of people, I don't know what percentage, depending on who you talk to, some will say it's a massive number and others won't, sincerely, I don't know if I should use the word adore, but really do believe that Kagame is the best thing that could happen to Rwanda and want to see him there. And so they will go there out of their own conviction, out of their own belief, their personal belief, and they get some personal pleasure is not the right word, but they get value from doing that for themselves, that they've expressed how much they support this particular person. So you put all those things together, and somehow you get close to understanding why you see these results that seem incredible on their face.
Just a quick one, because you talked about two things. One, you talked about the percentage of victory that is caused, but also the percentage of turnout.
Yes.
What is the registered number of voters in Rwanda?
The registered number of voters is about 6 point. I'm not going to have the figure off the top of my head.
Because I'm looking at the numbers here.
Close to 7 million.
Yes, I'm looking at the numbers here. If President Paul Kagame polled 6,650,722, Philippe Mpayimana 49,117. That puts your number to almost 6.7 million. And then Habineza 31,633.
Right.
So you're very close to 100% turnout.
That's right. And
Yes.
also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the results that have been released so far are still provisional in the sense that they might not include everything that's been counted. So there might even be an additional, number of votes that would increase turnout further potentially.
Interesting, incredible. Honor, and I must make a disclaimer here because we're having a chat on some platform, and I was saying it makes it difficult to even analyze this election, because I was watching as the results were coming through, and people on Rwanda TV attempting to discuss that election. I'm saying, what do you discuss about that election, especially if you're in Rwanda? And one of my friends posted and said, "So Charles, you mean you'll not be discussing this on analyzing this on Fourth Estate?" So I just caught myself there. But
yeah, I think
an incredible turnout.
Incredible, but abnormal you may say in a positive way. And I think President Paul Kagame himself said it, I think before the polling, that it was a foregone conclusion. This is the first time anywhere in the world where a candidate can declare victory before the results are out.
I thought all of them do.
I don't think. I think there's always some saying it's up to the voters, but it was so cocky. To me, I think the most amazing thing about Rwanda is this notion that this is the first country in the world where purely economic policies are the basis of elections.
Really?
I mean, that's the perception we are being given. That because the state has delivered so excellently 99% of the population is so happy that they want the president to stay in power. But I'm not aware of anywhere in the world, including in the great United States, where people vote purely on economic reasons. And specifically in Africa, the main organic component of voting blocks is ethnicity. And someone is here to convince me that there is no more ethnicity in Rwanda.
But it's also about security, right?
Yeah, I'm saying that's all okay. It's security, economic, but there's those social forces. If you can convince me that those social forces have been broken, the ethnic dimensions, then I can believe 98% is possible. Because I don't think President Kagame enjoys organic support at ethnic and other social dynamics. Even within his ethnic group, I'm sure there are people who are opposed to him, and they constitute more than 1%. So where do these people melt into during voting? Are they registered? This is amazing.
Dismas,
Yes.
help us answer that question. Where do those other people melt to during voting? And I wanted to put a question. Does it really make sense to still go through an election if you know you're going to get almost 100% of the vote?
It depends on which country. In my country, in this country, Uganda, probably would say yes. In Rwanda, I don't think. I think it's the many times that President Paul Kagame has gotten the numbers that exceed what you'd probably think of any president getting anywhere in the world. Now, what Onapito is asking, has the social dynamics of Rwanda changed? No. There's still the individuals who are the Tutsis, there's still the Hutus, there's still the Twas. The social dynamics, the economic dynamics, and the security dynamics are those which have changed and have made people come a little bit more closer than they should have been. So there has been a deliberate attempt to say we are Rwandan. It's the notion of saying we are Rwandan. So the idea that actually you're either a Hutu or you have been ostracized in the past, or you're a Tutsi, you are a victim of the genocide, those things are said only in silent conversations. The most important aspect of the narration that comes out is the narration of saying we are all Rwandese, we are development conscious, we are a country which has beaten most of the other countries in the region to be one of the best in the region. Literacy rates, children going to school, computer, all kind of things that make a society believe that actually the person who is their president is doing something that is unique about that country. So to that level, you can count it. But the problem for me, which I have with that, is that if then we hold the entire thinking into the hands of one individual, and it's the same thing that we speak about other regions, because that person is mortal. What if that person passes on? What happens? Has there been a deliberate attempt of saying, should there happen anything like this, then we have a route through which we can take so that the country cannot collapse and go back to the bad times that they had.
This is suppose President Kagame said he only offered himself to stand again because he accepted the push by the people of Rwanda and the RPF to stand again, and he hopes they can use these 7 years to prepare for his transition.
Yes, I have heard that, and it's a narration because they are a very strong political party. Even up to now, as you speak, and interestingly, I don't know, Mirena, whether you saw that, is that there are some even opposition parties which were actually campaigning for him.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them, actually.
Yes,
all of them.
Campaigning for him during the election. So the second thing is, if he said, because in 2006 I did interview him, and he told me he will not touch the constitution of Kenya. I remember, of Rwanda. I remember I was interviewing him in the Gambia, and he said, I will not touch the constitution of Rwanda to amend it so that I could stand for another term.
I spent some time on Friday looking for that clip where he says, me run for a third term? I cannot.
It was actually shortly after we amended our constitution to remove the third term. So he was saying it tongue in cheek to say that you people have messed up with your constitution, ours is still intact and will not touch it. So I was trying to find out why then did he change. I was told that the kind of pressure, it was the pressure from within his political party, the RPF, which told him that there are certain things which have not been completed within Rwanda, and the only person who can complete them is you, Your Excellency. So give us only 7 years to complete them. And when I heard that, I had the same narration elsewhere, which I've had for quite a long time. So he said, now, before he could accept, because when they went into voting, before he accept, he said, I do not want to hear you telling me 7 years down the road that there are things that can't be done in Rwanda unless it is Kagame who's doing them. So the same answer you're giving. Deal with all the issues that I could be doing because I'm the president, and by the time I finished my next 7 years as a president, those things have been dealt with. So that is the status quo of what.
And the same people who are telling us that he would never amend the constitution are now saying he's going to actually leave after 7 years.
Yes, I have seen a cover page, I think, of The Independent making trending, where Andrew had written and said, Kagame will not run for a third term or something like that. Let's take a break, pick up this discussion in a moment. I wanted to begin this segment with a kind of a short story. I went to do lunch with a friend some time back, and I think the food, local food, boiled, and I think the food was very tasty. So we went on eating and eating and eating, and then after some time, this friend looked at his plate, and the food was disappearing. He said, hey, I'm embarrassed. I'm about to finish the food. Now, how does President Paul Kagame feel that you win almost to the 100%? Is it normal for politics? Let me start with you, the politician on the table.
I'm sure he feels very happy. I saw him dancing after the election results were announced. Of course, there may be also, I mean, whatever he hears from his supporters is to vindicate that it's obvious he has won. He may have his own inkling that there's something that is being done which is not normal, but then he has to project that confidence and to show that it's a genuine victory. And that's important for a leader, because people need to both love him and fear him. So I'm sure he's happy with it.
Melina, is this unique for President Kagame? Or is it, where do you get this kind of percentage?
This kind of percentage. So as we were discussing during the break, in fact, previous elections in Rwanda, you find that most of them, all of them actually, have had over 90% for the incumbent. So it's actually, if you look at this election, you know, his other elections as well, but before him as well, Habyarimana and so on, they also had extremely high, in the 90-something percentile, support or vote share. So it's not actually different from, in terms of vote share, from those other elections. I'm not sure about the turnout, but in terms of vote share, it's actually not that different.
So the tradition
yeah, and maybe I just want to interject there. This also speaks to our pseudo-Westernization of politics. These are actually feudal states, and Rwanda has had a king and all this. No. So people basically have not grown. If it's a genuine vote, let's assume, they believe the president is another king, and the king gets all the people support the king. So
president is an English word.
Yeah.
Huh? There's a word for a king.
Yeah, which is in Kunda. Maybe you can help us with the
Yes.
the neighbor.
These numbers, just like we chatted during the break. Kayibanda got 98%.
All of them.
98%.
All of them.
Habyarimana 98%.
All of them. Gregory Kayibanda, 90s. Juvenal Habyarimana, 90s. This one, 90s. So for me, actually, sir, I was having a discussion with colleagues, and they were saying probably this is something that is deep, a social problem that we don't understand, that is within the body fabric of that particular population, which includes mine, because I come from Kisoro, and we're accused of being very royal, too much royal. But I was telling them that we can be royal, but at the same time, you don't want to risk the point at which we turn against you. The moment we turn against you, then it can become also another problem. So it's equally...
There's some debate on some rumored constitution amendment, and it started in Kisoro.
And
even the voting patterns.
Even our voting patterns, you have seen them. They have always remained the 100%, 100%. The last time the incumbent got 97%, there were serious questions. So I don't know whether it's the fear factor of the kingship that has always been the factor in that region, like Konapito is saying, because in Rwanda's case, you remember, King Kigeli was deliberately refused to enter back in Rwanda because the problems that they could stir the country back into troubles of divisions was so high that he actually died in exile. he was not allowed to come back to Rwanda. So there is too much belief and paying of respect to anyone who is called the leader, irrespective of. Habyarimana had similar, almost the same level of enthusiasm coming for his elections. If we followed, we were young kids, but we could follow, which is the same as what you're seeing now. Maybe this one is a bit more modern because it has social media, it has much more, exposure than the previous one. But as children listening to Radio Rwanda during Habyarimana's time, it was almost entirely the same. He was a god. No news would start before they saw that he was the best thing that the world ever had, including his wife. So,
is that the same thing happening now?
I don't know now, but what I'm trying to explain is that there is a correlation of a social norm that happens within those regions, with our communities in particular, for us who struggle across DRC,
and across political borders,
and I think even yourselves. So I someone who has studied, who is an expert in that area, maybe will help us, give us a better analysis. But that's my thinking.
No, but wouldn't you imagine, Medina, that when you have what you call a revolution, you try to stand, because I don't think President Kagame wants to be compared with Juvenal Habyarimana.
I imagine he doesn't.
I imagine he does. So if he doesn't,
even the name alone was a juvenile.
I don't think he does.
I don't know. Okay.
I want to add on something
Yes.
you said, which is that maybe if we compare Rwanda to Uganda, it isn't a fair comparison in the sense that you said, like in Kisoro, for example, maybe everyone votes the same. Now, Rwanda is much more similar. The people are much more similar than all the people in Uganda, right? So imagine you had Buganda was one country, maybe Ankole was one place, and so on. If one leader came up from those places, you might actually find that something like 90-something% of people would support. If they said, okay, our community, this is what we've decided, that's the person. You might find if you didn't have such a, same in Kenya.
Such a mix,
yeah,
as we do have here.
Right, then maybe you would have more
No,
kind
the reason I
of
was saying
cohesion.
that is because the mix in Kisoro reflects the mix across the border. It's the same.
And the voting patterns in
The
Kisoro
vote in Kisoro
are the same.
are the same.
Yes.
Yes.
So, is there a correlation between that as compared, for example, for people in Katakwi who might be voting? I'm not saying that in a constituency.
In Amuria.
In Amuria, they vote differently. But is there a reason why we hold people high in office in a certain regard, and we don't care whether we want to remove them from power, but maintain them at what cost? I don't know.
Ona, is that
No,
possible
no,
for the case of Comenta, for example?
No, of course, I think the northern Uganda bloc has tended to swing from one direction to the other, but actually much of the political south under NRM has remained solidly behind the president, which are partly attributed to the kingdoms. This reverence for the king, even when he's a child. I'm told Kabaka Mwanga was a child when he came to power, below 18, but people could kill in his name. So maybe this explains why we're having long-serving leaders, and maybe people should stop complaining.
I think that's a good point for us to pivot to another election that is rather thin. I don't know if we're able now, I want to come to Dismas first, we're able to tell with any fair amount of certainty that the guys behind us on the screen, there is Uhuru Kenyatta there is Raila Odinga, and there is Paul Kagame. Those are the guys of the elections of the moment. Any predictions for the Kenyan election? We see where that election might go.
Kenya, no. Too close to call. I guess the last kind of polls that came out, I think, was showing that none of them was getting the required 51%. There were 48 and about 47. That's 48.
I've seen 47, 43, then depending on who you're reading.
Which poll you are reading. But I don't think even they themselves. I saw today President Uhuru Kenyatta saying that he is hopeful that he won't lose, but if he loses, he's going to concede defeat. For me, that is a sign that as an incumbent leader, you know where exactly things have gone. That the shifting has happened, and that you can, as a president and a person who has the machinery at his disposal, he understands that this vote might not be very easy for him, given the kind of organization that NASA has had. NASA has given him probably the biggest run for his money for the first time. So I don't think that there is anyone who has a predictable answer. of exactly who's going to be the ultimate winner in the Kenyan election.
Melina, I know you spent a lot of time watching the Rwandan election, so I don't know if you have spent as much time following the Kenyan election. But the dynamics of the Kenyan election is that it's always going to be a close call.
That's right.
Yes. And so, any surprises expected?
Any surprises? Well, I think we should expect to be surprised, I suppose, if we don't know, if we can't predict the outcome. In some ways, actually, I was telling someone this, in some ways, the Kenyan politics, even though I can't claim to know as much about it as other places, such as here, reminds me to some extent of the US. In the sense that these elections, like you said, tend to be very close. So again, in the US, between the Republicans and the Democrats, it's kind of a toss-up, often based on how well the economy is performing and a few other things. But they tend to be very close. No matter what you do, it's going to come down very close to the wire. It's about turnout. It's about who you can actually get to the polls. So because the numbers are so close, it becomes a game of turnout. Who can actually get their voters to come? Another similarity is the ethnicity component. Of course, Kenya seems very different ethnically from the US, but the role of identity politics in both cases drives voter behavior, I think, to a large degree. So that's another similarity between the two.
Ona, you have an election that's structured around ethnic groups in Kenya.
Yeah.
And whoever is able, I think the chances that NASA has now is they have managed to put together a larger block of different ethnicities.
Yes.
Well, Jubilee is largely two larger blocks, and then you have the others coming in there. The question is, what will determine at the end of the day? Do you think that
Look,
congregation will?
I don't think that will change a lot. Maybe what will change is the turnout of new voters, because there's tendency for voters to stick with their horse. So that gives Uhuru a bit of an edge, because he won the previous election. And I think normally elections tend to become like football. People become emotional. So those who voted for him are likely to stick with him. But now, are there going to be new people who did not turn up, who are leaning towards Odinga, and they tilt? Because there was a difference of 800,000. So if
in the last election.
Yeah, if Odinga can bring in another 1 million or so, who are not...
Is it possible that Jubilee could, I mean Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto could shed 500,000 of their voters?
I think they could shed voters within their blocks, especially in the Rift Valley, again, who did not vote. It's very, very unlikely for you to shift people who voted because of complaints about food prices. We all know that often governments will not change much will not change a lot about the economic situation. So, as I said about Rwanda, it's always very little about economic performance. There is a lot of emotional as ethnic considerations. So for Odinga, if he's getting new voters, that is his best bet. If he's not, then...
Isn't that, Melina, where there is a little bit of a difference? Because I've been listening to people analyze the Kenyan election, and they say, if the price of what in Uganda we call posho, and they call unga or ugali in Kenya, if it shifted and became, it's already very expensive, that Uhuru would stand to lose this election because the government still sits. And you would imagine, being a bigger economy, Kenya is sometimes the economics might dictate a little bit more than ethnic division. I don't know how it will play out this time around.
I think they do. I mean, I think what you're saying is that if the economy is doing fairly well, these other factors can have a bigger role. However, you tend to find that where you find change of regime often is in times of economic either collapse or severe underperformance. So if a regime is performing, the economy is doing well, it's much harder to change than if people are disgruntled, you have a decline in incomes and things like that, then people are ready to throw in the towel. But so long as you have economic growth, yes, then these other factors matter, but it's much harder, I think, to change if you have strong economic growth.
Dismas,
yes.
There's been a discussion about Uhuru's performance in the last 5 years. And he's been touting all these projects. He's touted the standard gauge, which he launched the other day. He's looked at his economic numbers and thinks he's doing fairly well, and he's trying to promote his economic record. Can that help him? Can that save him?
I think I've read him, I've heard him speak about the projects and things that he has done. He has built roads, has built the railways, he has, increased the hospitals, he has done stuff like that. But if you go on the extreme side and look at what the NASA people are telling him, is that it's his last 5 years has been the time that Kenya has had the highest level of corruption in the country, and the prices of basic things like food. Kenya, to find the Kenyan government or the Kenyan population not getting posho, and being told that actually the posho that they're going to get, the maize that they're going to get, is from Brazil and is being imported by the president. There was quite a lot of emotion about that. I think in the past, around May, when the prices of posho fell. So for me, like you rightly said, if an economy like Kenya can rely heavily on either who is going to win on the politics of posho, then there must be a serious problem in terms of what Uhuru and his group have been doing for the last 5 years.
Shouldn't that be determining who becomes leader and who doesn't become leader? The price of
bread and butter issue. I follow what in Uganda. I think the president, the last time of Uganda, was told about posho. He said it's only for prisoners and and school children. So for us in Uganda, you can imagine if we were to compare which food can make Ugandans lose or win an election. What I'm thinking is maize, if they know that this is the staple food for the Kenyans, it would necessarily have made them be able to have it in plenty, because it doesn't stop them. They can trade, but apparently what I was being told is that actually it was being smuggled, and it was not getting to the right people at the right time, which is part of the election that NASA was using and saying, this is the corruption that we've been talking about. People are not getting food because the stores have not been sufficiently supplied.
I saw Raila Odinga, his a lone single candidate debate that he participated in, which was the only one actually, and he was talking about that politics of Ugali. And he said one of the was it the cabinet secretary or somebody who had suggested that even if there was a ban in Tanzania against exporting maize, they would somehow get it into Kenya through Panya roads, and,
Yes.
and he was saying he was opposed to that. But I'm looking at the East African here. There's a deep analysis in the East African, and the East African outlines 10 reasons, 10 factors that will determine the winner. Of course, this is a newspaper making commitment. If these factors don't hold or don't determine the election, you have to write another analysis next week to say.
That's your work.
Yes, of course. Factor number one, tribalism and regionalism. Factor number two, money and resources. Factor number three, incumbency. Factor number four, 2022 politics. So thinking ahead.
Very critical.
Yes.
Very
Factor number
critical.
five, campaign strategy. Factor number six, personality and character. Number seven, voter turnout. Number 8, demographics. Number 9, the Independent Elections and Borders Commission, or the Electoral Commission of Kenya. And number 10, security, election-related violence.
But that's too many things, isn't it?
Yes, security, election, and election-related violence. What do you think about this?
I think
Just
most
learn this about
of the others will determine how people will vote, but then who is announced the winner? The IEBC, I mean the Electoral Commission always comes to play, because I think there is already history where there was a lot of sort of evidence that Odinga won the 2007 elections, but then the announcement was fudged up to result in him being knocked out. So when that again happens, it's very possible. We live in Africa, these things happen. So that, I think, is a very, very critical point. Already one official was killed, and I think the issues are still out there. Why was he killed?
Yes.
But to me, 2020 is also a big one, because I think for the people who are 2022, the guys who are allied with Odinga, they all think that he's aging, and they must be sending signals to people in their regions that they have a chance. Either he will not run as they have committed, or he may just die during the first term.
They're trying to weigh themselves.
Yeah, I think especially Musyoka's block must be really salivating that he has a very good chance.
Gentlemen and lady, can we take a commercial break, and then we can come and pick up this analysis by Peter Monaita and see where it takes us. I don't know if Peter, who is an editor at the East African, has listed them in order, has ranked these factors. Maybe we'll discuss that after short commercial break. We'll be right back.
For people to oppose him.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We need to.
That is a legitimate.
Welcome back. This last segment of the Fourth Estate. Let me start with a message from someone signed off. I'll read the full message and then say who signed it. It says, but Charles, why would anyone oppose Paul Kagame? He's been a super performer, a model president on the continent. So on which grounds would the opposition ride on? The healthcare is working perfectly, education system is super, corruption is not there, the city is clean, poor families are getting out of poor homesteads, are getting better so fast, etc., etc. So the opposition were at a loss for the campaigning tools and messages. And this is a message from Margaret Mugisa Mohanga, Member of Parliament for Borashia County.
Can we say that she has done the same for her constituency?
No, she's not the president.
No, her constituency alone.
Yes.
Can she model it to be the same as Rwanda?
Just for me, one cannot. It seems there is little argument against those economic achievements, but there are other arguments that people could raise. One of them is the fact that he has been dishonest in the fact that he said he will not amend the constitution. But I mean, in other democracies, that could be an issue.
Technically, he didn't personally, right? That's how it works, right? He took a referendum to RPF, whoever it was, took a referendum.
Yeah, but I said that could be a basis for someone to oppose him. That he's not been consistent and he has lived. I mean, it may be a flimsy point, but it's a platform.
That's politics of the.
Yeah, but I'm saying, did any of the opposition guys raise that argument, and could they be allowed to raise it?
But you see, the opposition, first of all...
No, I'm just saying, did they raise it?
No, let me first tell you. First of all, who is the opposition in the case of Rwanda? They are the two candidates who stood against him, the ones who were accepted to be on the ballot. There was a Daniel Rwigara who couldn't stand. But there were other political parties that actually were in agreement with the referendum, that actually campaigned for him, and they were putting on their own, like, let's say, just for example, for purposes of giving an example, NRM campaigning and DP Norbert Mao standing and campaigning for the president at Harare. So it was the same thing.
Yeah.
And
this UPC did.
under
the memorandum of understanding.
That one we'll discuss another time. But you understand what it was.
Yeah.
So
no, they had the flags at the rallies.
Exactly.
They had people wearing the T-shirts of
the
the
T-shirts
other
of the ruling party.
Yeah, but I mean, just as Honorable Mohanga, she's suggesting that Rwanda is the only country in the world where there is no more basis for even government to continue because everything has been done. So there's actually no reason.
But I don't think anyone is saying that.
No, she's saying that there is no basis for opposing. You can't even have anything to say. So the government is perfect.
I had a quote from someone I talked to in Kigali who said, when you have a team that's always winning, you can't change the coach. That was his sentiment.
But the coach doesn't. The coach doesn't play. It's the players who are who are playing on the pitch.
Yes.
Okay. Ngojo says the Rwandese have chosen their destiny. Let us support them. Congratulations to Paul Kagame. Someone else, yes. This is someone who says, thanks, Toro is watching the show. Thank you very much. People are watching the show. And
we know why.
Okay. Someone says, tell Nkunda I am not a government and I have no services of my own to deliver. Whatever I can deliver, I have no resources of my own.
That's Margaret.
Yes. No, I think she's right because we mix up. Members of parliament go and promise to build bridges and pay school fees and build schools, which they are not supposed to do.
When she's campaigning, what does she say she's going to do to the people?
We're not discussing Margaret. And let me see. Okay. We need to go back to the Kenyan election as we end up this discussion. The ranking, honor. Number one, tribalism or religion. Surprising that on Mr. Manaita's list, who is my editor, security, election-related violence is number 10. Electoral Commission is number 9.
Look, the tribalism in Kenya, one would almost say is positive because it's not really so much about hating other tribes, but taking care of your own tribe. Because now NASA, as well as Jubilee, are coalitions of tribes. So there is no tribe which is working on its own, but they are trying to coalesce, and the leaders of the tribes are trying to secure interests of their tribes. So the tribes have become like organic constituencies. They are just, I mean, people may give it a negative connotation, but in my view, I think they are natural units of organization where people have common interests, and if they can merge with others to form a larger bloc, I don't see anything wrong with that. And looks a very good model. Some people in Uganda want to pretend that there is no tribalism and we shouldn't even aspire for it.
But you see, on a picture, that's the same thing, the same problem we had in 2007, which led to the violence in Kenya. Is that
it was not between two tribes.
It was
not between two tribes. There are multiple tribes.
No. The majority of the tribes that went on each other's head, we know it was the Kikuyu on one side, and then we had the Luos on the other side. So there are other
Valley.
So there, yes. So there are other configurations which you rightly say that have happened right now, because you have the Kikuyus with the Kalenjin. That's on the Jubilee side, because if Vice President William Ruto is anything to represent the Kalenjin, then on the other side of NASA, you have Odinga, you have Musyoka, you have Mudavadi, you have Wetangula, you have Isaac Ruto, who is trying actually to eat into the Kalenjin bloc that of Vice President Ruto,
Deputy President Ruto,
Deputy President William Ruto. So it is not entirely, and the sparks that people are fearing, and I agree with your editor, the sparks that people are fearing is that actually, if any of the big tribes, the Luo and the Kikuyu, start trading insults in between them, that's where the tension or anybody should put their eyes on, because that's where the biggest problem is. You remember what happened in Kibera? Kibera is largely because the majority of the people living in Kibera are Luos.
Yes.
So and that was the epicenter of the problems in 2007. So there is clearly it's not spoken. It has been put under under the leader to say that there's nothing wrong that is happening. But should anything happen in which the stalemate of these elections call for retreat into the tribal sentiments of people, you'll see a problem.
Melina, that's why you'd find some similarity between Kenya and Rwanda. Rwanda went through a horrible genocide, 1994. Kenya went through a horrible election in 2007, 2008. And the effort in both countries is to make sure that you suppress discussion as much as possible about these ethnic-based differences. I don't know what kind of democracy that produces at the end of the day.
Well, when is the end of the day? I think is one question. What is the timeline we're looking at, and what's the goal in the short, medium, and long term? Is having anyone who wants to contest at any time on the ballot, is that how we measure what we want in the short term or in the long term? I think those are some of the questions. I mean, in the case, what's very different about Rwanda and Kenya, yes, you may say ethnicity matters in both cases, but in Kenya there's no dominant ethnic group, right? That's why they have to form these coalitions. In Rwanda, that's not the case, and so it creates a very different dynamic if you're forming coalitions of smaller ethnic groups versus having one that's much larger than the other, at least according to previous censuses when you were allowed to ask people's ethnicity or how they were recorded by government.
Ona, if you look at the history of Rwanda, for example, the violence is cyclical and it takes a certain period. So 1959, a bit 1964, then you have another flare up 72, you have another flare up 1994. So if you have had some reasonable amount of peace and stability for the last 22, is it about 23 years now?
23.
Yeah, 23 years since 1994. Would you guarantee that this election, the model of electioneering and the drive towards democratization, that tends to shift focus from these other overt differences in people, to focus on the economy, to focus on security as a general good, is that sustainable?
I don't think history shows that it's sustainable. And the problem always will start from within, unfortunately, because if the RPF does not sort out the succession to Kagame, then it could be an internal split of some sort where then the old rivalries will take advantage. Because if there are people who identify themselves as Hutu, and I believe they are there, some are in exile, some are within the country, who are latent and don't feel happy, they are waiting for a spark. And that's what happened when RPF knocked out Abiyarimana. There was sort of a split within the Abiyarimana clique, much as the RPF was also contributing to the split, and that then everything falls apart. So RPF should deliver all the economic goodies, but they must also address a structural change of leadership within itself. No?
Let's go back to the Kenyan, the Kenyan election. The fears about security, because if you look, like Rwanda, 2007 violence, 2013 calm election. Now a lot of the comparisons have been between 2007 and 2017, 10 years later. You had the killing the other day of a senior official of the Electoral Commission. You have had the raid on the NASA offices because NASA was setting up a tally center, and the country's police and military was sent in and I mean tore it up. What does this mean?
If fears, my personal fears of a country going back to 2017 to 2007, as Kenya was at that time, I would honestly think that you'd rather have an election in which there is a clear winner with a huge majority, so that the public can be able to tell that this person has won, and therefore this one has no contest. So, and my fear that it comes back to the same thing, that the contestation between Mr. Raila and Mr. Uhuru is too close, and that's where emotions of the voters become central in any formation of grudges that are going to come. So, and in particular for the Kenyan, because the NASA group are accusing the military and the security forces of interfering in the electoral processes. And that is where the spark is going to happen. Because even in 2007, the accusation was that the army was siding with a particular political grouping. So I fear that in certain political modifications within the East African region, having a clear, probably a clear leader and clearly seen, not even from the polls, even from the exit polls. And in their case, I think the results are going to be announced at the constituency level, right? And the constituency level are in, they have about over 40,000 of those. And you can imagine if someone is going to lose and information is leaking out, this constituency he has lost, this constituency has lost in particular.
No, it's not leaking because people are tallying.
No, they are tallying, I know. Yes. But I'm saying the emotion is then, how they are going to manage it, in particular the Kenyan security system, I have very little faith in that.
Okay, we're going to take a few calls, but let me take a couple of more messages here that have come through. Actually, 3 messages that have come through. Someone names withheld says, elections in Rwanda was a reflection of fear and coercion. Sometimes I wonder, when I hear people praising Rwanda, they forget that it's at a cost. Another Deborah is watching us and says, thanks for the show. Thank you. I think Africans should write their own democracy, like we fought for independence. Rwanda is a model to look at. Leaders should serve their people. Kagame has done that, and now you people are complaining. I don't know who is you people among people in here. And Waf is watching us, says, there is an advantage for Raila which Ona may not want to recognize. Now Mudavadi is with Raila Amolo Odinga, perhaps coming with his 500,000 votes, because that's what he scored in the last election. And he says, so is Isaac Ruto directly taking away votes from Jubilee. Does that matter?
Yeah, that's why I said earlier that if there are new voters, okay, those may not be entirely new, but I think you will also need more of people who did not turn up, and there are some people who believe that the mood or the enthusiasm is low. Okay. So if it reflects into a turn up that is low, it may not help Odinga.
Okay. We are running very short on time. Let me take some callers. Hello? Hello? Yes, please. Your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah, my name is Kiseka Muhammad.
Yes, Muhammad Kisega.
And I'm calling from Kachiri.
Yes, please.
I have everything to worry about Kenya's elections because of the way they have been handling the Electoral Commission. There are rumors of rigging. Even when they were claiming the attack on Ruto's home, it was a claim that some people claim that there were some ballot papers kept at his place. So I'm worried that Uhuru has not handled the security of Kenya well, and I'm worried that it may even spill over to all the regions of Kenya after the elections. So we have to keep our fingers crossed for Kenyans. It's the best, but things are not good.
Okay.
I'm not good.
Thank you, Muhammad. Do you have another caller? Hello? Hello? Hello?
No.
Yes? Your voice is very low. Can hardly hear you.
Hello.
Hello? I think that line is troubled. Can you try another one? As that caller maybe tries to call again. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, please. Your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Beatrice.
Yes, please.
What I'm looking at, I was watching Citizen News,
Yes, please.
and most people haven't picked their identity cards because that's what they're going to use in voting. Now, my issue there, what I find as an issue, that is direct rigging, because even in some places, over 1,000, over 10,000, they don't have network. The reporting system, I think, will be so unfair, and I think it will be in favor of the incumbent, Uhuru Kenyatta, because we've already seen this. Laila has always won, but due to some cases, the other one becomes the president. So I'm looking at this thing happening again. History is going to repeat itself. I think they should have worked on the network, and they knew the election was coming in. They should have really tackled this issue with the communication houses, the Safaricom, the Orange, and all that, so that at least all places are covered with 3G and 4G. So I'm really looking at rigging somewhere. And of course, the Honorable, I've forgotten his name, Elmo something, he talked about that the tribalism is not there. But truly,
yes,
tribalism is still a big issue, and it might cost actually more lives once more, because we've had people dying already. So what is going to happen after the elections?
Let me ask this question to you. Do you think that the killing of Christopher Musando has anything to do with these elections, or could it have been other reasons?
To me, it has, because that is one way of playing your card smart. You have to kind of cover up if you know that this guy is not on your side, somehow you need to cover up to see how you can get the 51%. So it's really a worry. We just need to pray for Kenya.
Thank you very much. Do you have another caller? You wanted to pick it up?
No.
Say something? No. Honor. Just let me pick this call. Hello? Hello? Are you there? I think that caller is not there. Can you pick another? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please. Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm called Peter.
Peter, yes?
I'm calling from Yenza.
From Montina. Go ahead.
I think we should look at Raila as an enigma. There have been reports that Kenya has used, among the contenders, they have used around 150 billion Kenya shillings. And
like the Jubilee Party has used around 90 billion Kenya shillings.
Mm-hmm.
And the NASA party has, the NASA brigade has managed also to amass like about 70 billion Kenya shillings, which is a feat by itself.
Where are these figures coming from?
What?
Where are these figures coming from? Who's providing these numbers?
The Kenyan papers have been reporting about this.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So, I think Raila has very big chances. Hello?
Based on the money.
Yes, we can hear you.
Raila has big chances of taking this election because of Isaac Ruto and the governor of Bomet has really penetrated the constituency of William Ruto.
Okay.
And it's highly believed that he might that the data might get around 40% in the Rift Valley.
Okay.
And with the also inclusive of Mudavadi, who is Mudavadi and Wetangula, they are going to converse like most of the Luhya people who could have been moving towards the side of Uhuru. But now that there are two sons, their most sons are pro-NASA, they are going to give the NASA and Raila a lot of.
The coalition likely to bring in the blocks, the different tribal blocks. Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
You're trying to say that the NASA alliance bringing in the tribal blocks of voters.
Yes.
Yes, to Raila's to Raila's side of the ballot. To Raila. Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for that contribution. We need to bring this discussion back into the studio because we need to get out of here.
Yeah, Charles, I think the fears of...
Okay, can I just pick one more? Production tells me we still have a little bit more time. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please?
Yeah, this is Edward from Zimbabwe.
Yes, Edward. Keep your question or comment brief, please.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, I was trying to look at the situation of comparing Rwanda and Kenya.
Yes.
And which are really very different. For the Rwanda's case, they don't have many tribal units compared to Kenya. Rwanda has two dominant tribes, the Tutsi and the Hutus, and the clash is between those two. But if you look at Kenyan situation, there are so many tribes in Kenya. Camps, each camp is trying to woo or to attract those tribal units along the campsites, not on tribal lines, but on the campsites. And Kenya's politics have always been different from Rwanda's. Rwanda's political situation is quite different from Kenya. Kenya has never had the level of what I can call the level of dictatorship. If you look at the history of Rwanda in terms of military leaders they have had, you cannot compare them to Kenyan situation.
Okay.
I think Kenyan situation much as it is very contentious and much more disunited. It has a history of more of corruption vis-a-vis Rwanda's military dictatorship.
Thank you very much, Edward. Frederick Musimenta is watching us. He's from the Uganda Dialogue Arena in Kampala. And he says, in Rwanda, Kagame was expected to win. It was Kagame versus Kagame. In Kenya, I only pray for calmness. It's Raila's turn to lose. Factors favor him. Uhuru is panicking. Moses Kisa is watching us. Says, there is a book titled Kagame's Economic Mirage. I hope someone on the show has had a chance to read it. As to the election, there is more to what we see. I think there is more to what we see, I think, than we say, I think. That's what he wanted to write. I'm trying to think for him. And another, someone here says, thanks for being an articulate moderator. Please remind Ugandans to support Operation Wealth Creation, its campaign towards socio-economic transformation. It's the only way to go. And that is Major Nkojo. He's the spokesperson. Hello, we have a caller. Hello? 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 I can hear someone calling. Hello? Okay, let's come back to the studio because I can hear people trying to call, but we can't take all the calls because
Charles, I was just making a point on the fear of violence is justified, but I also believe that maybe Kenyans have learned their lessons.
I think the bigger question would be,
people say history repeats itself, but remember there was an interlude between 2007 and this election, and it went peaceful with the same contenders. And I think a new element came in of the ICC, much as the process aborted in terms of indicting Kenyatta and Ruto, but at least it sent a very strong warning that someone else may not get so lucky. They may go the tailor way. So I think most of the actors may not be so reckless to encourage their supporters. And often these supporters, if the leaders speak out and say, don't do it, we shall go to court, as Odinga has promised that he will not encourage supporters, he will go to court. So I'm not exactly terribly worried that there's going to be violence. Yeah.
Melina, you listen to
also the beauty about the Kenyan contenders is that they are guys with something to lose. They are not our paupers who sometimes masquerade in Ugandan elections. These are guys who are loaded. They have a lot to lose.
But you were once an MP.
Yeah, I was.
Were you masquerading?
Were you masquerading as a pauper?
I was a pauper. I was a pauper. So I think they are getting into become establishment politicians who have a lot to lose. And people sometimes say, well, bad luck, and we can live on.
Numbers of people sacrifice.
Yeah, but
they might have a lot to lose individually.
But
you see, the violence in 2007 never went to Muthaiga.
No.
It stayed in Kibera.
Yes.
It doesn't go to the high-end area.
Yeah, but I think the ICC did its part, much as people think it was an aborted process. For me, I think it was a nice check on the future of Kenyan politicians.
Melina, you listen to the lady, I think Beatrice. I think she's very close to the elections. She knows what is she knows what is going on there. And she talks about people who are being disenfranchised because of the system of voting. She talks about the transmission technology and says many parts of the country don't have network or may not have network. They haven't upgraded the system and the reporting system. How do you see these guys dealing with these particular issues?
Well, I think she raises an important point. I'm not sure if it was one of the 10 in that list there, but that is trust in, it has something to do with the last ones, trust in the institutions that are going to deliver the result. That includes the machines of the polling stations, that includes the Electoral Commission, that includes any one of those institutions. So, you know, regardless of what happens, whatever the result is, do people have faith in that result? Because if they don't, whoever loses is going to have a very strong incentive to try and do something about it if they think that it's not fair. So like you said, if the leaders are able to come out and say, you know, please, we don't think this is fair, but we're going to take it to court and request their supporters not to take to the streets or something like that, that could help. But otherwise, I think that's where the real tricky issue is if people don't have trust in the system. And for example, the killing of someone recently who is part of that system is not a good sign and may undermine trust in the institutions that will deliver the result.
Dismas, your last comment on this matter, because when we were here in the studio last week, that gentleman was missing as at that time. Monday, he was dead.
Fact was in the mortuary, but they pretended he was missing.
Yes, we were. At least the information wasn't out there that he had been discovered dead. And that's kind of shaping the discussion around where this election, the post-election period, might look like.
There are different versions that are coming out of Kenya, depending on which kind of media that you follow. There are some actually who are saying that he was killed because of a love affair went bad. There are some who are saying that it wasn't, that actually, then on the extreme side, there are those who are saying that he was killed simply because that there are allegedly certain hard disks that was delivering to NASA. And so That polarization, that's what the same thing that we're speaking about. That polarization of saying that different interpretation that comes out. And this one in particular happens in Kenya, a country which is very savvy in social media. Savvy to the extent that stories will appear and change as and when very quickly, in quick succession. How that information is going to be filtered down and used in the post-election management of this election. And on Apito, yes, I tend to agree some bits that the ICC has its own moderating factor around these elections. But the tensions that are building up, and in particular when certain NASA believes now this is their time. I think the word they were using is that now we are delivering you to Canaan. We have reached the shore of Israel we are about to enter. So give us that time. And two, Raila is having the last time to stand.
Yes.
He either becomes the president or he will be the perennial loser of the opposition in Kenya. Okay. That's the history that we'll have.
Our time is out. We need to get out of here, but I'll just take this last batch of messages. Honorable Margaret Mahanga came back to us and says, I participated closely in Kenya's last elections, and it's very clear that tribes matter 80%, i.e., every Kikuyu and their mother will vote a fellow Kikuyu, and so will the Luo and others. And Medina should note that unlike Uganda, Kenyan Kikuyu are extremely rich and powerful and have large numbers. But in Uganda, no single tribe has monopoly of dominance of wealth and numbers. And she adds, says that, note that in Uganda, Museveni defeats people in their own home area, which can't happen in Kenya whatsoever. Please, okay. Yeah, says, I think she's emphasizing her message on tribalism in Kenya and how it takes elections. Another listener here says, Dixako Nkubito from Boyogere says, I think President Paul Kagame had better sort out the issue of succession in this 7-year term. That has just started. Seemingly not all is well within the ruling RPF. About Kenya, the death of Chris Musando definitely poses a huge question mark. Remember, the NASA coalition immediately came up and condemned the act. Up to now, President Uhuru has never said anything about late Chris Musando. Musando death. We pray for peaceful elections. You're saying he has, huh?
Yes, he has. He said there was going to be investigation, and the individuals who committed the murder of Musando would be.
I think even the head of police has promised not to read Venezuela.
Yes.
Joe Osea in Intinda says the extreme polarization of Kenyan politics is a strong indicator of unresolved ethnic intolerance and uncut ties to Western imperialism. Kenyans need to overcome their fear and resist empty democracy, which is impeding its development. I'm not sure I understand what that means, especially the tie to Kenyan to Western imperialism. A listener here says, gift from Nansana says, now that Mr. Kagame has been selected once again, raises concern that Africa's forever President's Club of Mugabe, Museveni, Kabila and company and company advocates have gained a new member, and that other leaders in the region will feel reassured that they too can cling to power as long as they wish. That's someone called Gift. Another listener here says, people in Rwanda are intimidated. Even capable candidates fear to stand, lest they will be bizimungu. You remember 98% in certain country, and after people rioted. Wanapito has a point, but politely bringing it. A listener here says, thank you for the program. I'm just praying for the Kenyans because they look, by look of things, right now there is a likelihood of a repeat of 2007. This neck-to-neck competition is very risky. I support Uhuru Kenyatta though. Okay, I think we should stop there because the messages are too many and people are still calling. Thank you very much, Honor, making time for the show. Yeah, any prediction?
Look,
percentages.
As I said in the last show, that no incumbent has lost an election in this region, so I suspect Uhuru will squeeze through.
Melina, any prediction? Tuesday is very close.
Me too, just based on past, like you said, if we put all the data on incumbency and the likelihood of winning elections, just based on that, but otherwise it's hard to say.
Dismas?
Based on statistics, no. Based on my own thinking that of the things that are happening in Kenya, I think Raila Odinga might win.
Mm. Well, none of you predicts a runoff.
No.
That's your prediction.
No, I have a prediction. Thank you very much. Wanapito Econoid is Legal and Corporate Affairs at Nile Breweries, AB InBev. Melina Platas Izama is Assistant Professor of Political Science at
That's right. New York
University in Abu Dhabi.
That's right.
Yes. And Dismas Nkunda, Executive Director, Founding Executive Director of
Atrocities Watch.
Atrocities Watch. Thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us tonight, and especially those of you who gave us feedback and each one who watched the show. Keep your support. We thank our production crew that stays up late to deliver the show to you. And NTV will keep watching and delivering updates and actual reporting on the Kenyan election until it happens on Tuesday and after it has happened. And just one more thing. Wednesday, Melina, you're releasing a report. You did a report on elections in Uganda.
That's right.
Yes.
I did a study on the 2015 NRM primaries and the 2016 parliamentary elections, both for candidates for Member of Parliament, looking at what happens when you provide people with information in the form of something that looks like a debate. So people watch a video with showing all the candidates. Does watching those debates affect how people vote? So that's something I'll be doing this week. Maybe I'll have another opportunity to come and talk
When
about
are
it.
you having it?
Huh?
It's on Wednesday,
At what time?
in the afternoon.
Okay. Is it open invitation or by invitation?
It's by invitation. If you feel very, very passionately about coming, please find a way to reach me, perhaps through Charles, and we can work something out.
Thank you very much. Our time is out. We need to get out of here. Have a good night or good morning. I don't know yet. Till next Sunday.